when you first invited a team to come together, there was no way that we were trying to create an organization, and that has always been our ethos, isn't it? The autonomy of the local church, the authority of local eldership, etc. But as you once said, I think, well, we had to have a bank account, so we needed a name. And you took the name Coastlands. Why was that? I mean, was that because you were in Brighton?
Well, actually, that was before we had a team. Coastlands, we started the Bible Weeks, and we started cassettes and little booklets. And we just needed some kind of a title, as you say, a bank account, because they're running a Bible Week for 2,500 people. You needed something that you could say, well, what do we call it? And we called it Coastlands. And I was living in Seaford, and Seaford has right there this magnificent picture of the Seven Sisters, these 7 white cliffs, beautiful picture. And that picture kind of summed up something, and we actually used that artwork for our church in Seaford as well. So we borrowed that artwork and carried on with the word coastlands. Funny thing is, coastlands is not an English word, it's an American word. And I use the New American Standard Bible. You won't find anyone say, oh, we're going to the coastlands in England. But in the New American Standard, you'll find a lot of the promises in the book of Isaiah, particularly, it will say coastlands. And especially when Isaiah is talking about global evangelism, worldwide impact, it says coastlands are waiting for him. And it's just wonderful language. Yeah. And so coastlands was quite a good word because no one used it in England. It just was a different word, and it just worked for us. And so we just called it Coastlands. But it wasn't, we weren't a team of Coastlands. Coastlands was simply to sell cassettes, bookings for the Bible Week and so on. Then we were growing all the time and gathering. I was gathering the pastors initially in my home on Thursday mornings. We moved from Seaford to Brighton, and I started praying on a Thursday morning with Henry Tyler, who was the pastor of that little church. It was about 35 people, and I went and joined, and he and I used to pray together. And quite soon, David Fellingham came out from an Anglican church he'd been in, brought about 24 people with him, so we grew to about 75 people then. And the 3 of us used to pray together on Thursday mornings. And then it was interesting. The guy who was pastoring the church at Seaford that I'd led for 11 years said, may I join you on Thursday mornings? And he came across. And then the church in your home had started growing, and David Koch was leading it. He came out full time. Can I join you on Thursday mornings? Then a guy called Steve Brading, who was at Heathfield, and started a fresh church, which we were involved with. Can I join you? So on my Thursday mornings, every Thursday, this growing number of guys spent the morning praying together, which became fundamental to our growth, actually. And so we prayed together every Thursday morning until there were too many to be in the home. And by then we had obtained a large old mission church, Clarendon Church in Hove, and we started meeting there. And it just kept growing. Thursday mornings grew and grew and grew as we prayed together. And so again, there was terrific harmony because we're before God together every week. So we're constantly, gather, have a coffee, share news, pray.
And people would come even down from London and places, didn't they? I mean, a long way.
Oh yeah, it grew and grew. So Dave Holden would come from Sidcup, Ray Lowe would come from Biggin Hill, people would come from London. Until in the end we said, hey, we better do something about this. So Dave Holden took off a group, and they met in Sidcup, and I think maybe Ben Davis or somebody had a group. There were 3 groups in the end. So Thursday morning was a place where we gathered to pray. And very often, you're sharing news, you're sharing things that are burning in your heart. So our culture is growing all the time at the leadership level as well. And so as we gather, the whole group, the large crowd, the thousands, are being led by these guys who are together. And then one day we're together praying, and John Groves had a vision of this herd of elephants charging, and he sees in this vision jungle terrain, and they keep running and go through it. And then he prophesied, and the opening phrase was, "There are no well-worn paths before you, but together you can make a road where there is no road, and many will follow. You can accomplish more together than you could apart." Now that prophecy was fundamental to the forming of New Frontiers. Because until then, Terry was helping people. And we were just pals together. We did the Bible week. And then that was become a group. And to be honest, I had by that time met C.J. Mahaney and Larry Tomczak from America, who had a group they called People of Destiny. And I used to say, what is that? You know, in the Bible, where's that? And I was unhappy about the whole deal. Because I thought there's the local church and there's the global church. So what are you doing? And then when God spoke, I thought, wow, God is calling us to do that. Now later, I could find very happy biblical base for it. But at the time, I just felt, well, it's clearly God. And we talked, and we said, hey, what do we feel? And everyone said, yeah, God wants us to work together. Now, by that time, there might have been, I don't know, 24 churches who were already, the guys were together and coming to the Bible weeks. We'd already done maybe one Bible week or two. And so we talked about it, and we said, well, if we're going to start and make it official kind of thing, that we are a group of churches, who are we? What does that mean? And I came up with about 15 values. And it wasn't, we didn't have to rewrite the creed or something. You know, we're Orthodox evangelicals. So we weren't trying to come up with a creedal statement, but what kind of churches would we be? And I came up with about 15 things, brought it to the group, and we talked about them and adjusted one or two until we agreed, right, these are the things. I think it was about 15. We all agreed these would be the values with which we would build. And I mean, it was everything was so new. It was important to know, well, what do we mean? We're going to work together. What?
And of course, he was around somewhere in here, and my chronology is a little gone at this stage, but there was a prophecy using the word armada, which is a bit unfortunate because the armada went to the bottom of the sea, but nevertheless, the naval task force imagery. And I seem to remember that we really felt that what was joining us together was not organization and structure, it was mission. We were all going in the same direction. And I remember we used, it must be around the time of the Falklands War, I guess. So the early, middle 80s. We kind of used the imagery, I think, of different vessels, didn't we? Of the aircraft carrier, the submarine that provides protection for everyone, supply vessels that bring supplies for everyone. So that every church, which I think we would equate to each of those vessels, carried its own God-given characteristics that they could contribute into the whole, hence the more together than apart. And it was that sense of mission that really bound us together, wasn't it, at that stage, I think? That we had a goal, we were advancing the kingdom, the Great Commission, of course. I mean, the coastlands, you're talking about coastlands, the ends of the earth. Very similar sort of words, because we did carry the name coastlands, didn't we, until I think it was 85 or 86 when we then changed to New Frontiers. So it kind of overflowed into the name of the team. And that was powerfully outworked for me administratively at the Bible weeks, I remember, where we would ask particular churches to take responsibility for the children's work or for the cleaning of the toilets or whatever it was. Each vessel had its own its own role for the good of the whole.
I thought it's important because we'd now moved to Brighton, and the Brighton church was growing quite fast. And I wanted not to have a headquarters mentality, So I'd invited you to join me. So
Yes.
the administrative hub was there, I was there. And so the danger of becoming a kind of hub church, which I didn't feel was very biblical at all.
No.
And so I think the task force imagery, I remember that very well. And so, for instance, when we began to think, a number of these pastors, they're becoming shepherds of a flock. They've like got 100 people, 200 people, and realizing they've never had any kind of theological training at all. And so by that time, Arnold Bell, who was at London Bible College with me, and had his who's highly qualified theologically, we thought we must do some training. We got to train pastors. So we began a thing called EFM, Equip for Ministry. Yes. And because Arnold, I felt, was the key man at the time, I asked him to develop the syllabus, to look after the whole deal, and would his church, as you're saying, you take that on. So Equip for Ministry did not come out of Brighton.
No.
It came out of Arnold and his church at Odiham. They took the whole thing. They arranged it, they ran it, it was their responsibility. So that was the Armada image, that's your role. And then there was a prophecy about people in their golden years, that God, it was a beautiful, amazing prophecy somebody had about the whole family of God coming alive at one of our conferences. I think it was at Canberra.
It was at Canberra, and Alan Davis, that lovely, godly Welsh voice.
Yeah, it went through, and one of the phrases was people in their golden years.
Yes, their crowning years.
Crowning years, okay,
Crowning
you're
years.
right, crowning years. So Alan had a real passion to help some older people. So I said to Alan, will you run the Crowning Years Conference? So that your church, you handle the administration, the bookings, everything. We give it to you. And there was a guy called Malcolm Kite who was brilliant with children.
Yes.
So we said, you do it. So they took that whole thing. So we deliberately decentralized, gave away stuff to other ships on the Armada, to come back to your image. And that was a deliberate policy, that in trying to build something new, we weren't going to have a hub in Brighton. That we never tried to present Brighton as the model church. I think a lot of people looked to us because, we were growing well. We had some incredible gifts there. I mean, Dave Fellingham was there, Stuart Townend was there, a lot of these musicians, because I think because of Dave Fellingham's terrific gift and ability to bring musicians through. So there was an eye on Brighton, but we did all that we could to push it away.
Yes, yes, yes.